So any second, the compressor should kick off. The tank will be full, and we could try this thing out. All right, there it is. So recently I reached out to HornBlasters on Instagram because I was in the market for a train horn, and I knew exactly what I wanted to install it in, my 2008 Staten ASTRA. I mean, if you listen to the horn on this thing, it's begging for a train horn. All right, so in box number 1, we have all of our horns. Now, this just consists of 4 different lengths individual air horns. So we have our largest, we have 2 down from that. We go like that. And then we have our little guy. Now all these paired together, blowing at the same time, is what's gonna give us that literally, it's gonna sound like a freight train. Like, this is not going to just be a little air horn kind of noise. It is going to be friggin' loud. And in here we have HornBlaster shirt. And this is what really sold me on this kit, because this compressor, it's not too big. Like, I think I can squeeze it in the back of the Astra and not lose too much trunk space. In the bottom of the box here, we have a HornBlasters flag, got a little lanyard. We have fuses, wiring, sticker. All this stuff wasn't just like thrown in here like this. We got hardware, probably to mount the horns or compressor. Yeah, I was in here before, so everything's kind of a mess because I couldn't wait to see what was in here. So I think the best way to go about this is going to be to mount the horns in the front of the car first. Then we'll jump to the back, we'll get the compressor bolted in, and then it's just about running the hoses, the wiring, the switches into the car, and getting everything hooked up. But I think I have a pretty good idea of how I'm gonna mount this stuff. Let me just bring you guys in real quick, and I'll show you my plan. So I think I'm going to kind of just spread these guys out in here. So our big boy, I think I can mount it just straight across. And then our 2 middle-sized ones, I think I could kind of mount them like that. So they're going to kind of aim down and out. I have a space at the bottom, on each side, like right at the bottom of the bumper. The other one, which is actually shorter than this, can go like that. And then our little baby one, I could probably just mount it right on top of the other one, like that, because this can't be between the bumper support and the condenser because the end of the horn doesn't fit. But if it's low enough, yeah, that'll totally work. I can have 2 straight down this way, 1 that way, 1 that way, and actually I think I could do this to kind of even the sound out. We'll just spin it that way. So we got 1 shooting that way, 1 shooting that way, 2 shooting down. That should disperse out pretty evenly. So before we get those mounted up, take a look at our dry compressor fitment. It's a little guy. It fits in there surprisingly well. And I did measure this beforehand because I was under the impression this was going to be a pretty big tank. But with this guy kind of crammed all the way in the corner here, I got my scooter, which is my first EV, by the way. You kind of got to put this thing on an angle to get in the trunk of this car. So the tank there, scooter comes out. I mean, look at it. This car was like built for train horns. So to mount these up, I went to the hardware store. I got this 1/8 by 3/4 aluminum strip. And what I'm just gonna do is pretty much just bend this into whatever is gonna work to fit these things. So I'm gonna try to utilize existing bolts like this one up here. I'm going to bolt a piece of this to there, probably bend the bottom in an L, and then I can secure it with this nut right here where the air fitting is. I did put the fitting on there just to make sure that's not gonna hit anything. I'm gonna have plenty of clearance. For the bottom of that, I'm gonna utilize the little stud that's on the other end of the horn. Same thing, there's a couple of bolts in the bumper support that I could just kind of fab a bracket up and secure it using those existing bolts. And then I just gotta figure something out for the large one in the middle and the small one that's gonna go on top. Those are gonna need some bigger brackets just because there's nothing down there but plastic bumper to really mount it to, so I'm gonna have to kind of have something hang off the front of the support here and reach down to kind of suspend them inside the air gap in the front bumper. All right, I made a little progress and did not film any of it. So I really had no idea where I was gonna end up with this, and my plans were changing, so I just kind of did my thing, left the camera off to the side, and I actually came up with something that seems to work pretty well. So I connected the two medium-side horns connected together with this thin kind of crossbar. I just made a couple of L brackets, drilled into the core support, and we have that very, very firmly mounted. Now for the bottom of the horns, I used some more of that aluminum stripping. It's very dark down there, but you can see I just connected that to the bottom mounting point of the horn, and then I just self-tapped that, drilled it into the bumper support itself. Same thing on this side, so that's secured right down there. And yeah, this thing is super, super secure, and all I really have to do is find a place to mount the two bottom ones. Now the beautiful thing about this, now I actually have a point to mount the valve. So that I'm probably gonna, right out there, mount it. Clears the condenser, don't kind of worry about that rubbing on anything. And then our main feed line is gonna come from the tank, come into here, and then I have to kind of curl one back, get to that horn, and I'm gonna try my best to kind of equally space out these lines, like make them all the same length, because we want all the horns to blow off at the exact same time. So if there's differences in the length of the hose, that could potentially make the sound a little bit weird. I'm not really sure, but I'm gonna do my best to make sure they're all kind of equalized. All right, so our horns are mounted, and I am just blown away how nice this came out. Honestly, I can't believe it. I never actually, fabricated much of anything. I mean, at least not to this extent. Everything actually looks pretty symmetrical. I love the place where this valve fits. It's just like absolutely perfectly. We'll have our air coming in. I'll split them off to all our horns. The two lower ones, I ended up using just two hanger brackets. So I did, like I said, I mounted them to each other with just straight pieces of metal. And then I made a bracket that hooks under one of those straight pieces and just screws into the top of the bumper support, and a thinner one on this side. So that is in there, extremely secure, and we are ready to get the compressor bolted down. That hopefully should be simple enough. And then I got to pull this apart because I need to put Teflon tape on all the air fittings, and then I think we can go ahead and get our air lines all kind of cut to size, hooked up, and then we'll go ahead, run the hose to the back, and do all the wiring. So starting out back here, I did manage to get the compressor mounted up. Unfortunately, the way the frame rails run, they kind of like curve in as they get towards the middle of the car. That wasn't going to leave me room to get the front left mounting bolt through because they're just going to pop into the center of the frame rail, and obviously I can't get a nut on it. So I have this bolted in with 3. That seems like plenty. I have our 1/2-inch feed line coming off the tank that goes to the valve at the front of the car to blow the horns off. That hose is hooked up, and then I just ran that through one of the cargo loops and under the back seat. From there, that piece of hose just comes through this back plastic trim next to the back seat, and then it fishes under this other piece of plastic. There was actually a nice, like, narrow kind of channel, empty spot behind this plastic that I just started in the trunk area, and I just fished it through and it popped out right here. So that worked out very, very well. From there, it runs up to the dashboard, comes underneath, goes over the steering wheel, over the pedals, over everything, and then it curves down, and I made a hole on the towards the top of the firewall right next to a little rubber plug where I used to fish the power wire in for the compressor that I still have to hook up. And in order to make that hole on the firewall, because the way the cowl kind of overhangs and the brake booster being in the way, I had to kind of come up with something. So I went to the hardware store, I got this long extension. It's just a bit holder, like magnetic bit holder. I think this was a Makita brand. And then I got this Makita keyless chuck that fits into the bit holder. So with that, I was able to use my step bit, make a 7/8 inch hole, get all the way down there to the firewall, and then I just popped a little Harbor Freight rubber grommet in there. And yeah, our hose is coming out in a good spot, and all I have to do is hook it up to our valve. Now at the valve itself, I did get all of the air lines hooked up to the horns. So what I ended up doing was taking the longest run hose. So that's this horn on the right, and I cut that hose to length, and then I just cut that same length hose 3 more times and hooked up the other 3. So what that means is all 4 horns have the exact same length of hose, which hopefully means that when you honk the horn, they're all going to blow off at the exact same time and give us that, you know, train noise we are looking for. Now for the valve itself, I did hook up the wiring. So I have this running down over to the factory horn, which is actually right underneath the headlight here by the kind of passenger front frame rail. And I just cut the wires off the connector at the main horn. I left the connector in there in case I want to hook it back up, which I actually will. I'll get to that in a second. And yeah, I just ran the power and ground from the wiring on the car that went to the old horn, connected it to this. And if you listen, I'm actually going to leave my mic right next to it. So when I press the horn button, there we go. We have train horn, pretty much, just without the air yet. Now to finish this up, here is my plan. Well, first of all the kind of hard stuff, I got to figure it out. So I got the airline ran, everything's mounted where it needs to be. So all I have to do is hook up, well, that airline needs to go into the valve, and then I just need to hook up a relay for the compressor. Now for the control itself, as you saw, I did connect it so it's permanently the main horn button for the train, which is exactly what I wanted. I didn't want to add a second horn button anywhere because I know when I need it and like somebody actually cuts me off and I want to use the stupid horn, I'm going to just honk the dinky horn, because that's the first thing you're going to do is press the steering wheel, and it's going to be pointless. So I had this hooked up exactly how I wanted. However, I do still want to use the factory horn, state inspection reasons. I do sometimes, well, frequently have to park in a parking garage. And the alarm, which is interesting, if the alarm ever goes off, it's going to blow the train horn, which is actually a really good thing, but maybe not something I want all the time. So what I did was order a 3-way switch. So it's got a top position, a bottom position, and the middle is off. So I'm going to connect that to the dashboard, and one switch position is going to be train horn. The other switch position is going to turn off the train horn and do the regular horn. And that's how I'm going to control it. And most of the time, it's probably going to stay on train horn mode. But when I do need to get a state inspection or somebody else is maybe driving the car, I can switch it back over to the stock horn. right, so it's the next day. The installation is finished. I got all the covers back on. I got all the wiring tied up. I did a little bit of my own testing last night just to kind of make sure everything's working how I intended it to. And before we go for a drive, I'm just gonna give you guys a little tour on the setup, how I wired everything up, and then it's gonna be time to hit the streets. So starting out back here, we have our compressor mounted up in the trunk. The ground for the compressor is going right through this panel here for the rear fuse box, and then I just have it grounded to a 10mm nut that's in there that the fuse box is bolted down to. For the power, that's going off the compressor under the back seat to the driver's side footwell area where it connects to a relay, and our main half-inch air line is coming off the tank, and that also runs under the back seat along the driver's side rocker footwell area inside the car, and then out the firewall to the air valve under the hood. Now under the hood, once again, you see that half-inch air line that just comes out of the firewall, goes straight behind the grill to our air valve, which is also where all the horns are mounted. Then the power for the compressor is this wire right here. So that goes through a fuse holder that currently has a 30 amp fuse that was included in the kit. Then that just goes into the firewall and meets with that wire coming off the compressor where it connects to a relay by the driver's side footwell area. So a power wire coming from the compressor is connecting to the 87 terminal on the relay. The 30 terminal on the relay is that wire coming off the battery. Now to control that relay, I took ignition power from my powered subwoofer under the seat. I have a separate relay under the hood for that, where when you turn the key on, it sends ignition power to that subwoofer. So I just tapped off the power side of that, and that gave me key on power to turn that relay on. And then the ground side of that is actually running up to the switch that I mounted by the sunroof controls. So from that relay, I ran the wires up through the headliner and to this switch. Now this guy I am proud of. This is the cherry on top for this installation, and I couldn't be happier with the way this works. So we have 3 positions on this switch. The center, which is 0, which is off, so absolutely no horn function at all. The center terminal on the switch is going straight to ground. Now one side of it is going to the ground side of the factory horn. The other side is going to the ground side of the air valve for the train horns. So the way the horn circuit works in this car, when you press the horn, it sends 12 volts to the stock horn. So all I did was take that power wire that's going to the stock horn and I teed it off. So I ran one wire to the factory horn and I ran the other wire to the air valve for the train horn. So now when you press the horn button, it's going to send 12 volts to both the train horn and the factory horn, but they're not gonna blow until they get ground. So that's where my little switch comes in. Basically, the ground for one horn goes to one side of the switch, the ground for the other horn goes to the other side. So as you can see, if we have it on train horn, well, let's start off here. We have it on 1, which is the factory horn. We have factory horn, we put it on 2. Jesus, you get the idea. Now, I'm not gonna go around just honking at random people on the street. As fun as that may be, that's not the reason I installed these, obviously. Ever since I got this car, driving in New York, I don't know, it's like, I guess because it's smaller, it's like either people don't see me or they just don't give a shit and they just think because it's a small car, they can kind of budge their way in. So that is who these horns are for. Now, I do have a dash cam installed and it is running all the time, so you better believe whenever this happens, I'm gonna clip that piece and I'm gonna kind of put it aside, save it, and eventually maybe I'll put a little, compilation of all these clips together and show you exactly, well, showcase the beautiful drivers of New York. And once again, just to demonstrate, I'm driving along, somebody cuts me off. That doesn't do much. Sounds a little bit weak, don't you think? But somebody cuts me off now. Wasn't me, officer. It must have been a truck. And right now the compressor kicked on. It's filling back up. Honestly, it's not loud at all. It's just a very low hum. I was initially considering putting the compressor itself like outside the car, inside the back bumper cover or something. But considering how low it is, I mean, I'm not even gonna, there's really no point. And the tank really isn't that big. I mean, if I'm able to fit it in this car and not really lose much of my trunk space, installing these in like a Tahoe or something, which I'm actually having a lot of fun with these things. So don't be surprised if I pick up a set and put them in Tahiti. But you are gonna see a little bit more on this thing. I need to do the timing belt. I need to do a repair to the flex pipe. Depending on interest, if you guys really care, if you have cars like this, I know a lot of you guys overseas seem to enjoy these videos. I will make you know, more content on this car, but I am kind of in the middle of a Trans Am video. I got actually half of it filmed, and I'm just waiting on parts to come back now before I finish that video up. So yeah, next thing we're going to be diving into is the Trans Am, and I'm kind of in the middle of moving right now. That's why my uploads are very far apart and kind of like sporadic, so that's not something that's going to stay this way. It's just I've been busy with other stuff at the moment. But for now, that is going to do it for this video. So hopefully I'll see you again just in a few days.